Okay, so this is the second video introducing you to the basics of the Maya interface. And we've got our ball here, and I'm just going to use this ball in order to show you what the basic controls are in Maya. So I'm clicking here on the move tool, and I'm just going to move this ball just so it's slightly above the grid there. And we're just going to go through the different bits of the interface to make sure that you've got the hang of everything. Okay, so what we want to do now is set up our screen so it's helpful for animation. And right now we're looking at what is called the perspective view, and it's called the perspective view because we're viewing this ball in perspective on the grid. But there are some different layouts that we can use, and it's useful to know what they are and how you might use them. So if you click on this button up here, Panels, and then go down to Layouts, and I'm going to suggest that we go to 3 panes split top. So that's Panels, Layouts, 3 panes split top, and that is going to give you this. And now we have a 3-way split viewport. Now the reason we want this is that you often want to be looking at a ball or your character from several different angles at once. We'll get into more detail, get into this in more detail later on. But for now, let's just talk about how you might set up your shot for animation. So you've got 3 different windows here, and what I want you to do is go to Panels, Perspective, Perspective, and click on that. So now you've got the ball in a perspective view on the right-hand side and also on the left-hand side. And in the right-hand side, go ahead and click 5 on your keyboard, and that will give us the grey shade view. Now down here on this bottom panel, go ahead and click on Panels, Layouts, actually go to Panels, Panel. There's so many menus in Maya that I sometimes myself forget where they are, even though I've been using this piece of software for more than a decade now. It is a big and deep program, and there is a lot to learn, but don't despair. You do get used to this interface eventually. It just does take a little bit of time to get the hang of it. So go to Panels, Panel, and then what you want to do is go to Graph Editor, and that pulls up the Graph Editor below. Now we want to name that. Double clicking up here to name it ball, like we had it before. Not sure why it's unnamed itself, but it has. And you can see it mentioned down here in the graph editor. Now the graph editor is a complex piece of machinery. It's basically the part of Maya that records what your curves do. It's very mathematics based, and there's a separate lecture on how to use it, so I'm not going to get into detail here on what the graph editor does. But suffice it for now to say that this is the basic layout, the 3-way split layout that we want for animation. And in this side view, I'm going to go to Panels, and I'm going to go to Orthographic Side, like that. And what that does is it shows us now the same thing from the side view. So if I were to take our ball and move it upwards, it would move upwards in the side view. If I move it downwards, it will move downwards in the side view. This is very useful. Sometimes you want to see things from the side view. You can also go to different views. So for example, I can go to Panels, Orthographic Top. That's the top view. Now if I move it up and down in Y, we won't see any change there because it's actually moving towards us. But if I move it in X, you'll see it moving in the X-axis. So here it's as if you're looking down on the ball, as if it were architect's plans. Or we can go to Panels, Orthographic Front View, and that way we have the front view there. So there are various different views that you can get going using this button. But now this is the basic animation layout that we want. Actually, I'll just take that back to Orthographic Side, which is typically the one we want in animation. But this split, perspective view on your right, an orthographic view on your left, and then the graph editor underneath is pretty much what we want for animation. So what we're going to do now is save this. And the way to do that is to go to Window, Save Current Layout. Window, Save Current Layout. Click on that, and now it's going to ask you to name your layout, and I'm going to call this animation because that's our animation layout, and I'm going to click OK. And now if I wanted to get this back, let's say for some reason I lost this view, I'll just go ahead and hit the spacebar, so we've now got just the perspective view. I can pull that back anytime I want by clicking on Window, Saved Layouts, and then go down to Animation, and there it is down at the bottom. We've just created that. Actually, you probably can't see it. It may be just out of the screen, annoyingly. But there's a list here of layouts, saved layouts, and when I go down here, I get to animation. I'm sorry, it's just out of reach of the screen, but it is there at the bottom, just below. You can see stereo perspective there, and it's 2 down. It's animation, and if I click on it, you'll see that we go back to our original view. And you can toggle between any of these views just by hitting the spacebar. So if I select this window and now hit the spacebar, which I'm now going to do, that enlarges that window. If I hit the spacebar again, it takes me back to the saved view. Again, if I go into this window here on the left, hit spacebar, now that window is magnified. Hit spacebar again, and it takes me back to the 3-way split layout. Again, with the graph editor, I can select this window here, click on it, hit the spacebar, and that takes me to the graph editor. Hit the spacebar again, and we go back to the 3-way split. And this is very useful for toggling between different views while you're animating. Okay, so that's a little bit more about the basic layout. Now I'm going to show you what some of the rest of these displays do, and I want to show you a very useful button in Maya which helps you turn these things on and off, and it's up here under the display button there, and if I take it down to UI elements, display UI elements, and UI stands for user interface. So we go display UI elements, and you'll see the status line, the shelf, the time slider, the range slider, the command line, the help line, the toolbox, and the channel box and the layer editor are all turned on. Now we can turn all of these things off in turn. So why don't I do that? So I'm going to turn off the channel box. That's this piece over here. I turn it off, it's going to disappear. Actually, what I'll do is I'll tear off this menu so we can turn them all off one by one. You can tear off any of these menus just by selecting this that little dotted line there and clicking on it, and now we can turn these things off. That was the channel box over there. I'm just going to turn that off, so now the channel box disappears. This is the attribute editor, very useful in Maya. I'm going to turn off the attribute editor. Now that one's going to go away. Here's the toolbox. That's that little column on the left there. I'm going to turn off the toolbox. The help line, that's this one down here. The help line, we'll turn that off. The command line, that's this little guy here where it says MEL. MEL is Maya embedded language. That's what that stands for, and that is the code that Maya is written in. So if you turn off the command line, you'll stop seeing the Maya codes. Turn off range slider. That's this guy down here. That shows us what the range is of the frames that we're looking at. Let's turn that off. Time slider. That's that one there. Shelf. That's that one up there. And status line. And the status line is that shelf there. So I'm going to turn them all off and then turn them back on again and show you what each one of them does. Okay, so let's turn back the status line on. And you can come back to this menu anytime you like. Anytime you lose a bit of the Maya menu, which happens all the time, frankly, because it's very easy to turn things off by mistake, you just go to Display, UI Elements, and just start turning stuff back on, and you'll find that your menus will reappear. Status line, we've just turned that on. Let's just turn it off there and then on. So that's this menu up here, and this is full of useful buttons. I'm not going to go into them all in great detail now. We'll come on to them later, but these are all very, very useful buttons indeed. So you want, generally speaking, you want your status line to be on. Your shelf, you don't. Shelves are very useful. We can create shelf tabs. This is a general shelf that we're looking at. Maya also gives you an animation shelf, which is full of useful little tools. Right now, we actually don't need the shelf tab, so I think we can leave it off for now. In general, you want to keep your screen as uncluttered as possible, so you're not looking at too much stuff. Time slider. Now we definitely want that because that shows us how many frames are in our shot. So time slider we definitely want. How long is our shot? The time slider will tell us. The range slider is what shows us what we're actually viewing. We want to be starting at frame 1, but we could start the shot at frame 25. The range slider shows us where we're actually looking at any given moment. Now the command line. Turn the command line on. That's what that's recording the commands in Mel. So sometimes you want to type commands in Mel, give Maya instructions using its Mel language, and that's where you would want to use the command line. The helpline, that we can turn that one on as well. The toolbox, that's this one down here. That's obviously very useful. That gives us the basic tools of move, rotate, and also scale. Move, rotate, and scale. Now there's a desktop shortcut for these. If I press W on my keyboard, that will take me to move. If I press E on my keyboard, that will take me to rotate. And if I press R on my keyboard, that will take me to scale. W for move, E for rotate, R scale. W, E, R. W, E, R. These are useful shortcuts to know because you're going to use them a lot. But even if you don't learn them, you can still just select things here using the toolbox. Attribute editor. The attribute editor will come back to later on. We don't need to know about it now. I'm going to turn that off for now. You can basically have the attribute editor or the channel box on, not both. Well, actually, you can have them. If you have both of them ticked here, what Maya will do is it will give you the option to toggle between the two. So you can toggle attribute editor there or channel box there. And the channel box, you'll remember, is what's showing us the values of these different objects. So if I move the ball up and down in the y-axis, you'll see the translate y values are changing there. If I move it in the x-axis, you'll see the translate x values change in the channel box. And you can also change the move settings of any of these tools using the move settings tool here. But we won't go into that in great detail now. For now, I'm just going to hit the X button there to get rid of that that control because we don't, or that menu, because we don't need that right at the moment. So that's generally speaking what you would want to have on or off at any different moment. Some other buttons that are very useful to know at this stage. This little button up here, this is the this little frog. It always looks like a frog to me. That's the render button. So if you want to render out your shot, and there's a separate there are separate videos on the rendering process which you should watch. But should you wish to render out, you just click on that button there, and it will actually those are your render settings. Sorry, so that gives you the settings for the render. If you actually just want to take a render, you just press the little clapper there, and that will give you a render of your ball. And what rendering does is it basically takes a 3D object and turns it into something 2D. So here in Maya we have a 3D object, and obviously when you want to create flat images for the screen, you need to render them out, and that's what rendering does. It takes something that's 3D and makes it 2D. Now this is the exact same process that you might be engaging in if you're, say, painting a picture. Let's say you're painting a picture of a bucolic woodland scene. You're taking your woodland, which is a 3D object, a 3D environment, and you're turning it into a flat painting, a 2D object. You are creating a render. That is all that Maya does when it's rendering. Okay, a few other controls that are worth knowing about. there's two little controls up here. This button here is the Select Surface Object button, and this is the Select by Component button. So this is Object Mode, Component Mode. Object Mode, Component Mode. Now it's very important, generally speaking, when you're animating in Maya, that you are in Object Mode and not in Component Mode. If I press Component Mode there, you'll see that the object changes and we get all these little purple dots on top of the ball. And what we can do, now that we're in Component Mode, is we can get under the hood. So let's say I drag select these little vertices here, and you'll see now that we're in the move tool here, I can start actually moving these around. Now, this is very useful if we want to do modeling. Let's say we want to start to change the, I'm just going to Z this out. Let's say we wanted to change the value of the sphere. Let's say, for example, that we wanted to make the sphere much taller. We could do that. Now that's very useful if you want to take a sphere and turn it into something different. But it's not very useful if you're animating, because when you're animating, you very rarely want to be changing the basic topography of the models that you're animating. And when I say very rarely, I mean never. Because the basic process in Maya is you create 3D models and then you animate them. You don't change the 3D models while you're animating them. So I'm just going to click Z to take that back to the beginning. Now, so if you're in component mode, back to here, we can move our ball around, and you suddenly find that your object looks like that, and you suddenly find that you're moving vertices around, that's bad. You don't want to be doing that. So you want to make sure that you are in fact in object mode all the time when you're animating, component mode when you're modeling. Another tab that is very useful to know about is under the display button or the display menu. Remember, we looked at UI elements, that's user interface elements, but let's now look under heads up display, and that gives us lots of information about what we're actually looking at. So again, I'm going to click on the little dotted line here to tear off that menu, and I'm going to add in a few things like current frame. I'm going to click on current frame, and what that does is it shows you the current frame in your shot. So if I scroll through the shot to frame 48, you'll see it's now showing me that we're at frame 48. This is very, very useful when you create a play blast of your animation, which is to say you're making a little video of it. Very, very good to have the frame count on there, because it means that when I'm looking at your video, I can say, oh, well, at frame 47 there's a problem here, or frame 32 there's a problem as well. Also, the view cube, you can turn this on and off, which is sometimes handy. And also it'll show you the frame rate, which is to say the rate that Maya's playing stuff back. It'll show you the poly count, how many polygons there are, or how many vertices and edges and faces there are, and so on, and other useful things. So the heads-up display is a useful little tool as well. Okay, so that's the end of the introduction to the basic controls in Maya. The next thing we're going to talk about is how to set a project and actually get started.